Well, good afternoon, everybody. All right, we're here. My webcam had to update, apparently. Super frustrating. But yeah, sorry I wasn't here last week. Um, we had a bunch of stuff to do. I had to get all the seeds ready and posted on our Etsy page. So all that's there, and it was just a lot. But we're here. And cold stratification. So let's see who's here. What's up, Dan Lowe? What's up, Zoo? Glad you guys made it. Y'all made it. Um, hey Brian, welcome, welcome. All right. So cold stratification. That's what you guys picked. Can y'all hear me okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you want to do. Hey 54. Glad you're here. Hey Tanya. Thank you, Brian. Okay. So in our quest to really get going with seed starting, winter time is a great time and the only time that we can easily start some seeds. This is Sarah. This is the first live you've ever watched. Well, welcome to the show. I'm not excellent at doing it, but I'm getting better. But so cold stratification, there are certain seeds that need to be cold. Well, really what they need to do is they need to go through a period of hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold to basically, to keep it simple, wear down that seed coating on the outside so that the plant can actually break out of it. It kind of wakes it up. It mimics nature completely. So a lot of flowers are like this. For vegetables and stuff, I can't think off the top of my head anything really. I mean, I guess you could say garlic because it needs that chill period, but it's not the same thing. Um, Tree seeds, stuff like that. And so if you've ever planted a seed and you just cannot get it to germinate, this could be why. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that absolutely that's the case, but it's a lot of the times, especially with flowers and trees, this is a big, big deal and can even go into the fruit tree world as well. So if you think about it, before we really get into cold stratification, and we'll go over some easy and hard methods as well, just think about what it means to be cold stratified. So, what the requirements. And if you think about it, the seed falls, lays on the ground, dormant for the winter, and then boom, it starts to germinate in the spring. Well, that basically has met its requirements, and that's what we're trying to mimic, right? But because we're gardeners and homesteaders, we want to kind of get our seeds ready a little bit earlier so we can mimic this cold stratification. And some stuff you just have to do anyways. And really the idea of it is so you don't purchase your pack of seeds, stick them in the house, hold on to them, and then 8 weeks before your last frost date, you start them and you're like, well, why didn't they germinate? I don't know. Well, what we can do is a lot of times I got my fan on and it is way too high and things are blowing around and I'm actually cold. But the way it works is you take the easiest method, absolute easiest, is you find a seed, needs to have cold stratification, right? For instance, some of the stuff I use it for is milkweed. Um, what else? What's it called? Foxgloves. I use it for and this is not for my gardening, but for my bonsai. Japanese black pine, red maples, trident maples, all that stuff, and sweet William. I think I used it for. So what I do is there's the first and the easiest method is to put your seeds in some kind of tray, set them outside in the wintertime, and then water them and just let them sit and put them in a nice sheltered space so they can get some water, but they don't need to be watered a lot because you can make the seed can actually rot. So you'll go through winter and then come spring, your seed will germinate. as long as it hasn't stayed totally saturated. So the benefit of this is we can take that seed tray and we can start moving it around. So you get a lot of heavy rains, you can move it so it's totally covered, put it in an unheated garage, something like that. So that's the slowest method to do it. It does work, but again, it's really slow and it's kind of left up to the devices of nature, and overwatering is a huge, huge, huge issue. And if you live somewhere in the southern tier of the states, it can be difficult because the plants that it doesn't get cold enough to even meet that requirement. So that's really an issue. So there's other methods that we can do as well. And then remember, as you go through winter, that tray that's sitting outside is going to be cold. You put it in the shade, it'll stay cold. And then as the months warm up and you get those hot, or those not hot, but warm and cold nights, days, that fluctuation is what will help trigger that seed to germinate. So it's a really good method. It's the easiest. I do it with trees a lot. Let's see. My success rate I did Japanese black pines. I started 50 seeds and 2 of them germinated. And the problem was I just left them and didn't even care about them at all. I just kind of walked away. If I would have taken care of them, that would have been fine. But it's really easy to do with that method, with all of these methods, because you're just kind of off. It's out of sight, out of mind, right? And the more you mess with it, the worse. The more you mess with it, the more chances you have to mess something up. So let's say you get a pack of seeds and you're like, cool, I want to grow this flower, awesome sauce. Oh, wait, it has to go through this process, but we only have a couple weeks until our frost date, or until our planting season. Whatever it is, you're not going to have that time frame. Well, now you need to mimic it yourself. It's already starting to get warm outside. It's not getting cold. So 2 ways to do that. And the easiest and quickest way is to take the seeds, get them moist, put them in. And I don't like using the paper towel method, but you want to keep them moist. Put them in the refrigerator for about a month, and then take them out, give them some time, put them back in for a couple days, and then do that process a little bit. And then that will trigger it to start to germinate. You'll open the package up, the paper towel, and you'll start to see those first roots coming out. Gently transplant it, and you should be off to the races. So that's another option. And then another option, I'm going through this really fast because it's not super complicated, is you can take it and you've got a little bit of time. You put it in the refrigerator for a week, you take it out, and then you put it on top of the refrigerator. So the refrigerator, as the pump runs, it creates heat. And so it'll heat that bag up, and then you take it off, you put it back in, and you do that for a period of time. I'd say roughly 40 days or so. You do that. It's a little bit more hands-on, but you can do it. You can take and stick a bag full of soil and then put your seeds in there. You can put pots in there. You can do a lot of different things, but you want to keep them nice and moist, and you want to make sure that you're getting that temperature fluctuation going, and it doesn't have to be extreme, but you don't want to go from 38 degrees to 39 degrees or 40 degrees. You want to go, from the refrigerator to the warmth of your house plus some. So I wouldn't put it on a fireplace. I wouldn't do anything like that, but I definitely would stick it on top of your refrigerator. And then it'll generate that heat, and it'll help. And you'll see the bag start to sweat. You may want to burp it every once in a while just to kind of let some of that humidity out and then put it back in. But it's really important that you make sure that it stays moist but not soggy, right? That's like the thing with what we do for seed starting, is making sure that we are in that sweet spot. So we're trying to work on that. I use my greenhouse. So I've shown you the graph on my greenhouse in previous lives. I posted it through the podcast if people are following the podcast and seen it. So I use a greenhouse, and the reason why is because the daytime I get that fluctuation, right? I get hard fluctuations. So what I'll do is I'll take my seeds, I put them out in the middle of winter, probably in the shade in the middle of winter to ensure that they stay cold. Because remember, seeds don't need sunlight to germinate typically, unless it says give sunlight. And that's usually like wildflowers and stuff like that. But a lot of times, if you have to sow a seed in the ground, to a certain depth, the directions say that it does not need sunlight to germinate. It just needs water. So I'll put it in the shade, let it sit for a week or two. And then if the weather is cooperating, then I'll put it back into the greenhouse and then I'll let it sit and it'll run its cycle. And we germinated probably about 50 milkweeds doing that method last year. And that worked out really well. Another thing you can do to kind of speed up the process on the outside, let's say you get a tray. I've got I don't have it in here, but I've got a tray that's probably, I know you can't really tell how long it is, but it's big. And then it's got a bunch of holes in it. And so I'll fill that with dirt and I'll leave about that much of it empty at the top. And so what I'll do is I'll put it outside and then maybe I'll take some plastic and put over it at some point, like some cellophane, and that will help kick that heat up to germinate. It's kind of like the milk jugs that people use and stuff like that, which is another method you can do. But the problem is when you put that seed in the ground and the milk jug on top of it, you're already getting that heat right away. And you really need to have a little bit of a chill period first. So, and this is what takes what you can grow into a whole new world, because you can now grow things and place them easier where you want that are not the easiest to grow. So, like we grow a lot of marigolds and zinnias and stuff like that. Well, you know why zinnias are so popular? Because they're so easy to grow. You just drop them on the ground and they grow. They don't need that chill period or anything like that. So there's a lot of different seeds that you can go into this, but that cold stratification is what it's called. And anytime you see a seed that needs to be sowed in the fall, can be buried, and that's really about it, I think. And if you think about it, any kind of fruit that falls on the ground and then would germinate, a lot of times you can just assume that they need some kind of period like this. So you could even stick them in a low tunnel if you've built a low tunnel. That would work out really good. So Zoo did the same thing. She germinated all of her fruit trees in the refrigerator, and it worked. So that's great. So does anybody have any questions? Because I want to expand on the refrigerator and how it helps the garden too, since we're doing this. But does anybody have any questions or anything like that, or want anything they want to say? More importantly, shoot. And at any time you can say something. That doesn't matter to me. I don't care if you interrupt me. So I have a little refrigerator. I don't know how big it is. It's smaller than your dorm room refrigerator. I use it all the time. So right now I'm pre-chilling my garlic. I did the video about that. It's been in there for a while. And then I use it to do stuff like this. I store bulbs in there. I don't store seeds in it, typically, because I'm not really looking for super longevity of the seeds. But we store seeds in it. I put when I make sugar water for the bees, I store it in there. So we do that. There's a lot of different uses for a refrigerator. So if you can come across a cheap refrigerator, by all means, you should pick it up, because it can really change the way that you can use stuff in your garden. Now, I keep mine in my garage. So that method that I told you about putting the seeds on top to get that heat's not really going to work for me in that one. Now, I could do it in my house, but my wife is kind of tired of all this gardening stuff laying around all the time. Shocker. So, I just kind of move it all outside and do that. But all of these things work out well. Now, if you're trying to grow something that needs a cold period, like let's say you want to overwinter something, but it needs a cold period that you don't feel like you can provide, as long as it doesn't have leaves on it, like you need to preserve the roots or something like that, you can put that in a refrigerator as well. I've seen a lot of people do that with like maple bonsai trees and stuff like that. They live in Florida and they need that cold period, like real southern Florida or something like that. And they'll actually have big refrigerators that they'll put their trees in to get to meet that period. So it's an overlooked part of the garden, and gardening centers do us a disservice by basically selling us anything we want, but then it's left up to us to kind of figure out these little intricacies about it. Now I know we can all do research and stuff like that, but it's really hard to kind of, you see a plant and you're like, oh, cool. Like the place up the road for me, they have a sale every fall, and we used to go. We didn't go this year, or maybe it didn't happen yet, or it did happen, so we didn't go. But when we went, there was a bunch of the same plants there. So clearly they weren't the most popular, but everybody was buying them. They were all flowering at this time. They looked amazing. They had these long trumpet flowers on them. Well, they're not for our area. Their zone, which it does matter in this conversation, was like zone 10, and we're not in zone 10. So it would get too cold for them. So having that is a real issue. So Brian wants to know how long you should start the process before you can plant the seeds. I would give it at minimum a month. If you don't want to set them outside or anything like that, a minimum a month. Now, let's say you get snow, doesn't matter. Put it out there. Again, if you put it somewhere covered, it won't get buried real deep in the snow, but that's even better because it keeps them cold for that amount of time. So I would give it minimum a month. But this is why we always recommend on our show and even on here, like, buy your seeds as early as possible and make your decisions about what you want to grow so that you can make these plans ahead of time and make it easier. For me, it would be a hell of a lot easier for me to get a couple trays of 6-packs and sow all the seeds that I want to cold stratify and put them out in a section out in my yard. For instance, I know you guys have seen my seed starting area. I would use that. That would be a really good place. It's kind of protected from the wind, and it's shaded, so it would stay cooler. Yeah, Jeff, I didn't have time yesterday, so I just had a bunch of deadlines all at once come across, and I had to meet them. That's the way it goes. So yeah, but it'll be back on Wednesdays. Don't worry. I know a lot of people don't like change. I sure don't. But so yeah, that's all cold stratification. It's a super easy process, but it's a really important process. And I don't want you to kind of get a pack of seeds or something like that and be like, what the hell? And when you're doing it, just be patient. Be patient. Remember, they have to get cold and then start that fluctuation in temperature before they actually start to sprout. And you'll see them. And sure enough, my milkweeds last year, they sat out in the greenhouse for probably 2.5 months before they decided to germinate. And, we were not getting as cool temperatures, and then they started to germinate. So oh, you ordered some seeds, Brian? I'm glad you got them. So any questions? And also anything you guys want to talk about, go for it. This is a super short subject, but it was something I wanted to bring to your attention. Not really much else to say about it, except for what do I want to grow that needs to be cold stratified? That's going to be the question. Hey, Connie. Yeah, Jeff, that's onions for me. It's not happening this year. They come out at the wrong time. They didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It made it very awkward to plant. Hey, Shiloh. So I got a video coming out Saturday. Yeah. And just like I said in the other video, I'm planting broccoli. I've already planted some broccoli, or started, excuse me. I started some broccoli, but that's usually my first would be cabbage, and then I go to broccoli, And then I just kind of work down the list from there, all of my cool stuff, and then get into my warm season. And I have not done soil blocks. I'm actually not interested in doing soil blocks. It's a, I think last I checked, it was like a $70 tool that I just don't need. So I just use seed containers and roll with it. But I know a lot of people use seed blocks and like it. I don't need it. It doesn't work for me, especially in the house. It's kind of an issue. I'm definitely going to be starting some more milkweed this year. Um, I'm trying to think what else I've done. My phone is like dead, so I can't use it to. Can I? Let's look up some seeds that would be cold stratified. See if I can pick something out. Yeah, echinacea is one. Rosemary, and I've done thyme. So there's so many of them, and that's a lot of reasons why people have a hard time doing it. Let's see. Ads. There's a lot of seed. Like, I guess if you grow artichokes, never grown an artichoke. Black-eyed Susans is another one too. I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm glad I saw that because that's something I'm is like high on my list. Goldenrod is another one that's on my list that I want to do. Then that's for my bees. Um, Chamomile needs it. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's exactly why you can never get echinacea to germinate, Danlo. We started a bunch of echinacea last year. Unfortunately, when I got a load of donkey crap this year, I covered them all up, so I got to start over. But yeah, they definitely require it. Spinach is the opposite, though. Well, no, it's not the opposite, but it doesn't like to start when the temperatures are above. I think it's like 82 degrees. It just won't germinate at all. So yeah, echinacea is definitely one of them. I'm just looking at the popular ones. Goldenrod's on this list. Hardy hibiscus is a popular one. Hollyhock seeds. So somebody sent me a bag of hollyhock seeds. I had a whole sandwich bag full of them, and I'm kicking myself because I took them out and I just said, well, I just want a big patch of it, and I dumped them all out. They never germinated, but I dumped them out in the spring, so they didn't get that cold period. So that's exactly why. I've wanted to do a lavender is one. So let me tell you a trick about lavender. You can start it from seed, but it's easier to get a plant and then propagate it from that. So I took one plant and I propagated one plant into 20 lavender plants in 1 year. I did that with lavender and hydrangea. Dude, Shiloh, that's exactly right. You go out there and you cut them, and I mean, you could do that anywhere. Brussels sprouts are really easy to germinate. You're probably in a good area, Jeff. I imagine you don't get too. No, I take that back. It may be a little bit difficult for you, but I'm stubborn. I just keep growing it. Yeah, I didn't have the benefit, Tanya, of buying them. They were given to me, so I have no clue what they are. Lupin is another one that I've tried to grow for years and can never get it to grow, and that's why. Certain marigolds are, but not all of them. What Definitely, what turns bright green on your lavender? So one thing I am going to start is in my garden, it's probably turning bright green because it loves the water and it's getting nutrients. That's probably why it's turning bright green. Um, on my tunnels, my cattle panel tunnels, the back one, I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it forward to the new garden beds that I'm going to put in. And then in the back there is a little bit shaded. And so one of the panels, would it be one or two? No, it'd be one of the panels that I removed from the trellis that had the mosaic virus. I'm going to move over there and I'm going to plant sweet peas on it. And I know I need to plant sweet peas like now because they need that. So that's what I'm going to do. And one of the ones that I'm not going to start it inside. I'll probably do a direct sowing, and then I'll do another sowing in the greenhouse in trays just as a backup. And then I'll have those to put in. And if they grow up, then fine, I'll move them somewhere else. Yeah. Okra loves it hot too. So heat. So seeds that don't like heat are a totally different subject and super frustrating. Carrots, spinach, apparently parsnips I found this year. What else? Off the top of my head, that's all I can think of that just like will not germinate if it's hot. So that's a hard one too, because a lot of times to meet that time requirement for us to plant, it needs to be cooler, but we have to do it when it's warmer. So you can kind of see where we go with that. Is anybody planting anything that needs to have a cold stratification period? I'm looking at all of these. It's a bunch of coneflowers on this list that I have here. Some of these seeds I would never start, like sedum, I would never start. St. John's wort's another one. That's a good herb for like medicinal purposes and stuff like that. I would probably do that. Hey, Frosty. Any kind of wildflower, though. So while we're on the subject of flowers, because I don't talk a lot about flowers. I don't know why, I just don't. Wildflowers, and there's a lot of flowers that fall into that category. You're talking cosmos. I don't even know the names of wildflowers. Whatever. If you buy like a wildflower seed pack, they need sunlight to germinate. So you don't bury them in the ground, just kind of scatter them. And then you can also walk on them. And then that'll give them good ground contact. But they need sunlight, and they can actually make it through the whole winter because that's what they do. They're wildflowers. So they do that. So Shiloh's got it going on. She's got her fridge stacked up. Frosty, once you get into certain flowers and stuff like that, unless you have, you'll come across them for sure. So T, if you want to just put them outside now, you can definitely put them outside now. The only issue really with like scattering seeds in the fall is the birds are going to eat them because we're not sitting around waiting for them and watching them. It's kind of, like I said, out of sight, out of mind. So if you want to do something inside or doing one of the methods I told you about, you can wait until it's a little bit colder, and then you can kind of, you can determine that. They don't need to go from a warm season into a cold season into a warm season. You're going to meet that with that natural fluctuation in temperatures. So you can absolutely plant stuff now. Because of what I do, my news feed is filled with like gardening hacks and tricks and tips and people talking about what to plant this time of year. And like perennials and stuff like that. Like this is the time of year to plant perennials. Don't plant them in the spring because what happens, and like echinacea is one of them, when you plant them now, the roots will continue to grow throughout the winter very slowly. But what happens is that period of time. So right now, even though this is crazy, even though we have had no rain in 8 weeks, because it's not as hot, the ground stays wet longer and it retains moisture. And that helps those plants get more situated. And so you kick off. So the typical saying is when you plant something that's not a vegetable, the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, and the third year it leaps. Well, if you plant it in the fall, you eliminate that sleep period. And what that means is, let's say in the spring, I get a perennial plant and I put it in the ground. Well, it's going to just kind of sit there for that spring. And then the next year, you'll see a little bit of growth. And then finally, on the third year, you'll really see the growth. Well, by putting it in the fall, you're eliminating that, because while we are not doing much outside, underground, they are continuing to grow. And if you add mulch and keep them a little bit warmer, it'll speed it up. And then we can eliminate some of that sleep period. So you're now down to roughly 2 years until you start to see that leap period in which it'll really start to grow and you'll have a full-fledging plant. Jeff, I'm supposed to get some rain today, and it's teasing me. I've been watching the radar like a crack fiend, and I can't. I got to check now because it's been slow. You're welcome, definitely. I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah, we're about to get some rain finally, so we'll probably get about a half an inch, but I'll take whatever I can get. But right now, if you go outside, a lot of the flowers and plants and stuff like that are going to seed. And so when they fall, a lot of us want to go out and collect that seed, and that's fine. But when you collect that seed, you just remember you need to get it out or get it that cold stratification period, because that's what it needs. And it's naturally doing that. So right now, all the goldenrod, I noticed yesterday, all of the goldenrod in my yard is all in going to seed. So I need to get out there and cut them, but I will never bring them in my house ever. I will just set them in my shed or something like that where it'll be protected, and then I can put them where I want them to be, and I don't have to buy the seed. So that's what I'm going to do. Marigolds don't need it either, but they do well because they'll drop and regrow. But truth be told, I don't really get a lot of volunteer marigolds. So it's interesting when I look at it that way, but I've never had, I've got a marigold out there with thousands of seeds on it, and I guarantee you I won't have a single marigold volunteer next year, which is weird. So I'll collect those seeds too, and I don't have to buy them anymore. My my mouse on my computer died. I got to use the pad. I hate that thing. It makes me mad. Let me see if I missed anything up here. Nope. Yeah, Shiloh, you can plant onions now. I've done it and it works, but I've missed some of the growth period because I'm about 2 months behind schedule. So I don't really, but I'm not growing onions next year. I've made my mind up. Kind of. I don't know. I'm kind of addicted too. So there's that. What's gimmicky? Yeah, it is. Here's the deal with my onions. I never grew onions before because I can buy a bag of onions for $4. Um, and then I started growing onions. I love growing onions, very rewarding. But when it came down to it, because I can't get them out until June, it's an awkward time in my garden. I mean, if you want to equate it to awkward, to put it bluntly. It's kind of like your garden's going through puberty. You know what I mean? Like it's just a super weird time where you can't put anything in. Everything's growing. It's starting to get pretty warm, pretty hot. So I did it this year, and then I put corn behind it. But the corn, so onions are very, very, very heavy nitrogen feeders, but so is corn. So what happened was when I got my corn seed in, my onions had depleted the nitrogen out of the soil, and I just don't think I could ever really catch up appropriately. And I didn't want to over fertilize. So I looked at it and I said, you know what? Let's just start over and just not worry about it. I'll still do my row of garlic. It comes out at the same time, but it's only a row. So it's not the end of the year, end of the world. Tanya, where are you located? You know, Zoo, I had somebody give me some walk-in onions and I never planted them. I didn't have anywhere I wanted to put them. That was my issue. Eddie, when you plant them, you so as you're growing them, don't forget to give them haircuts. So when the onion's this long, cut it down to this. While it's in the pot, do that 4 or 5 times, and then you'll get a nice thick onion. And then when you put it in, just make sure you're watering and you're giving it a lot of nitrogen up until the time that it bulbs. You have to continuously push nitrogen to it, give it a slow release, give it a shot of it, some juice, and really push it. And then when it starts to bulb, you stop the nitrogen completely and stop fertilizing. But that's how you get them to really grow. But make sure you're giving them lots and lots of water. Isn't that crazy, Connie, how they can just kind of sit there and lay dormant for a while? Um, Brian, you could do a cold frame. I would, if the suggestion that I would have would be start them, give them a couple weeks at minimum with the freezing temperatures, the cold temperatures, and then move them into the cold frame. And I think it would work, but you just really want to make sure that they get nice and cold and they stay cold. That's the key. You want, like, every night that it gets cold, you want it to hit that temperature. But I think you could eventually move them in there, and then that would speed up that process and also eliminates a hardening off process. Those seeds, I don't want to bring them in my house. My seed shelf over here gets full and stays full. If you're only getting golf ball size, Tanya, you got to fertilize them more and plant them earlier. That's the key. You want as much green growth as possible before they start to bulb. If you don't get green growth, because once they bulb, they don't really do much more for the green growth. They start focusing on the bulb. So you want to give them as much as that, and you want to eliminate all weed pressure around it. But if you don't know what kind of onion to grow, just Google onion day length, and there's a map. Johnny Seeds has one that pops up every time, and it's clear to see. But you would grow a long day onion, and you need to fertilize heavy with nitrogen. They take a lot of food. It is one of the heaviest feeders in your garden. Yeah, see, Jeff's using a 2900. I think I use a 1600. And when I feed them, so I plant them right around now typically, and I would feed them probably 6 times before they start to bulb. So grandma or Zeus, sorry. I don't ring my onions, but I know a lot of people that do. I just try to keep my soil nice and soft, but that does help too. See, you're giving them pure nitrogen with that bunny poo, so it absolutely does help. I mean, those are all the keys to it. And a lot of times, we were having a conversation internally. on, but with Batavia and myself on the Backyard Gardens podcast, and we were talking about fertilizing, and there's this general disdain around fertilizing and misunderstanding that no matter what, compost will be the answer, and that is absolutely not true. We need to fertilize, but we need to fertilize smartly. That's the key. Yeah, Tanya, it's you can so nitrogen is water soluble. So what that means is if you put a block of nitrogen, let's just get fake here, and put a block of nitrogen on top of your garden and you water it and water it and water it, it'll wash out of your garden versus other nutrients will not necessarily wash out. So a lot of times you'll go and you'll get a soil test at the end of the season, and the first thing they say is add nitrogen, and you add it and you'll see boom, you'll see huge growth, and then you'll get lots of rains and you're watering and the plants are using it up and stuff like that, versus like phosphates that's basically stay in your soil until you plant something that will take it out. That's why I put buckwheat as a cover crop, because it will take some of the phosphate out of my soil. Yeah, Jeff, I've heard a lot of people say Miracle Grow, a lot of organic people say when they did something like that, because the nitrogen in the synthetic fertilizers is stronger, they had a lot of good growth on their onions. That's a good method, Shiloh. That's kind of what I do too. If I have to, I'll use it, but I try to stick to organic. But I know a guy who, and I will say this, he switched to synthetic fertilizers, and we plant the same way, and his produce is always twice the size of mine with synthetic fertilizers. So just kind of depends, you know what I mean? I'm happy with what I'm getting, so I'm not overly concerned, but at the same time, you know, smaller space, out producing more, but then you start getting into soil health and stuff like that. And but he gets soil tests and doesn't have an issue, but he's very conscious about what he's doing with it. And there's a lot of options too, depending on how you want to fertilize, like what method. So I use granular organic fertilizers, and I also use an injection system through my drip lines, and it's almost impossible to find a water soluble organic fertilizer that is not fish smell. So, and the reason why I don't want to use that is because that's what brings a raccoon in my yard, and I can't sit there and kill all of them. So there's that. I did start using the Chilean nitrate, and that's been working pretty good. I have not had any issues with them. And a low dose is better than no dose. So just think about it that way. But if you're using an organic fertilizer once a month, drop some down, and you should keep it flowing. Especially if you're doing multi-season gardening, we need to really kind of recharge that soil. It's funny, every time I do a video about fertilizer, it's two camps. I love it, or you're stupid and you don't know what you're talking about. Every time. Yeah, Connie, there's a lot of people with that same story. And I think it's good to have that option. I mean, why not, right? It was created, so. Yeah, I don't know what kind of I don't think I use mushroom compost. Maybe I'll get some this year. Let's see, what year is it for me? This is the year that I will be adding my 50-50 mix to my garden. So that'll be 50% compost, 50% topsoil. So I can see I may have to make my own if I want to use mushroom, but I can do that. The guys that I go to will help me with that. Look, when I do my seedlings, I don't do organic for my seedlings. I've showed this, but I'll show you again. That's what I use. Slow release. I put in each. This is how I don't know how to do this without making a mess. I put. Can y'all see? Yeah. That's about how much I put in, and that's all I'll put in each cell, and it works great. It feeds for 6 months, so well they say 6 months. Is it 6 or 4 months? 4 months. So you got to think if they're in here for 2 months, by the time I put them out, they're wrapping up, and I put that in there with it. It's just a little bit. It's not much. But Job sticks are the same idea. It's just slow release. So it only waters when it gets wet. So I use my seed starting mix is Pro Mix with mycorrhizae, and it's I don't know if I should say it's dead soil, but it's not charged, topsoil and stuff like that. But yeah, every seed. Show you this seed right here. Well, this isn't seed. This is osmocote, same size as like a brassica seed. It has enough fertilizer built into it to get the seed going, and then after that, you're on your own. So I don't start feeding until I get my first set of true leaves. So the first leaves that come up, their only job is to collect enough light to get the real leaves, the true leaves that you're going to see on your plant for the rest of its life cycle going. So this seed will have enough to get that to that point, and then once the true leaves start to come up, it's time to feed. And I will start generally. I've got a bunch of that fish fertilizer left, so I'll use a lot of that this year. But I'll mix a gallon to like a teaspoon of it, just barely shade it, and then I'll put that in, and that usually kicks it off right. It doesn't stink to high heaven in my house. And then at the same time, I'll put that osmocote on. So the fish fertilizer will be giving it that initial light dose that it can handle. And then the osmocote, as we water more and more, it'll start. And I won't give it another fish fertilizer probably until maybe 2 weeks before we move it out to harden off. What do you guys use for your seedlings? Or do you not use anything at all? I feel I've never gotten big into worm castings. That's not really, I don't know. I kind of have a hard time. I've always looked at, look, if I have healthy soil, I have worms, and then you get worm castings naturally. Fish emulsion and organic Rev. Is Rev a brand? I'll look it up. Okay. Humic acid. Okay. Fish emulsion, organic Rev, light dose of Miracle Grow. Nothing. Starting a worm bin. Flora Nova Grow. Miracle Grow. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people are using Miracle Grow. Never would have guessed that. I don't know why. It's been around for 1,000 years. Well, not really, but it's been around forever. It used to be the only fertilizer you could get. Worm castings, organic rev, fish emulsion for seedlings, and was considering granular. Tanya, I would pare that down a little bit. So organic fertilizer in a seedling doesn't work well because it needs usually about 14 days at the optimum temperatures and moisture for it to start to break down and interact with the soil. So by the time you put the granulars on, let's say typically our seedlings are in the house for 8 weeks, right? So you've got 10 days to germinate roughly. And then you're not feeding for another week, maybe two. So at that point, we're a month in, and then you got 4 weeks left. And so then you put your liquid fertilizer on, that'll feed immediately. Then you put your granular fertilizer in. Now you're, at most 4 weeks away from putting it outside. So you're not really doing much. I would just keep it to those liquid fertilizers. And something like the Job or something like that, the Osmocote, that's something that you can kind of, will start to slowly feed it instead of waiting for it to break down. So the difference between the synthetic and organic is the function of how it feeds a plant. Those are the differences. And you have to understand that organic has to have interaction with soil in order to feed. Eddie, I know a lot of people that will like flush out their fish tanks and use that water, and it works great. I used to have a fish tank. When I had a freshwater fish tank, worked good. Saltwater, don't do it. Just saying. So bone meal for potassium, blood meal for nitrogen. I've heard trifecta works pretty good too. Yes, definitely. It's one of those things. I was hard against synthetics too, but it's an interesting way. It's late in this to bring this up, but it's interesting the way we have looked at things over the years. 15 years ago, it was all organic, nothing but organic. If you don't do organic, you're killing yourself. And now it's like coming back around, and people are like, yeah, a little synthetic might work. I think enough people had enough issues with their garden and got desperate, and they saw that there was a change. And I mean, it's not the end of the world. I think a good mixture of both is the way to go. Well, Shiloh, the only reason why they're doing that is because people are buying it. If we don't buy it, they wouldn't do it. How you like that? Ha ha. I got this we started putting the Backyard Gardens podcast on YouTube. It's going to be coming up soon. And I got this new webcam for it, and it's rough. I got big feet and I get stuck. What would you float and grow in a fish tank? I don't know. I don't know about floating and growing. I've done the only hydroponics I've done is like an aero garden type situation. I had a company last year, I believe it was Let Pot. They sent me one and I grew in it and it was good, but it's not for me. All right, next live. What do you guys want to talk about? I feel like everybody wants to talk about seed starting, but I could be totally off on that. Yeah, combinations definitely. Which, by the way, I really like your name. It flows off the tongue well. I think a combination works good, and I think it's when you start to understand what you're doing and what the function of each one is. I think that is really how it goes. So the biggest thing is don't go into it blind and just be like, I'm gonna do every single thing possible. I mean, you're doing too much. Take it down a notch and then just work through it. I think a good base of organic for being the bulk of your fertilization is the way to go, because really what we're doing is we're raising soil. Setting up a watering system, seed starting. Seed starting sounds great. Oh, do you plan on selling plants or having a sale event? I sell plants every year. I sell seedlings in my local area. Yeah, I do. Let's fight about tomatoes. Yes, Shiloh is actually considering doing a video about selling plants. Problem is, there's not really much to it. Grow a plant, get the word out. It's really about it. Um, Sparrow, we sell seeds through our podcast. The link is in the description of all the videos. I believe it better be. I'll be pissed if it's not. We just put up all of our seeds for this year. So we now have a full year's worth of seeds in the shop. All of the seeds are seeds that myself or Batavia have grown or like to grow for the most part. The only one that's not, we have a king corn in there this year. We were kind of like, whatever, corn's corn. So don't kill me. But we hadn't had a whole lot of success with corn. So that's the one that we picked. But otherwise, we do have that. And if you listen to the podcast, there is a discount code, but I'm not going to give it here because podcast is a platform for that. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so we try to give you lots of seeds. What we did is we went through, and it's really hurting us in the long run, but we went through and looked at, I went through some of my old seed packets and I saw like I got 0.1 grams of tomatoes. And I remember opening that seed packet and saying like, this isn't enough. And so we give 0.5 grams, which is 5 times the amount, but it's enough for you to have seeds for a garden, even a larger garden. And if you have a small garden, you'll have seeds for next year as well. So that's kind of where our mind is with that. So it's definitely, I did not do it this year because I didn't do a lot, but I will be doing propagation next year. That's one of my like passions is actually, you know what? Why don't we talk about propagation? Y'all cool with that? I love propagating stuff. It is the best. Everybody. I grow some house plants, but it's not, I'm not really, I'm more, to be honest, I am more into food and survival type stuff. I believe that gardening is a way is a proof of freedom. And by knowing how to grow my own food and being able to produce enough our goal is to do 80% of our grocery bill of our fruits and vegetables through our grocery bill. So if we can meet that, which we can and we do, then that means that we have a level of freedom that is above a lot of others. So that's why we do that. I also grow. So within that conversation, we do flowers. Not a lot of flowers, but we do flowers. But basically, I'm doing those to support my bees so I can make more honey, so I can make more money because honey is money. So that's really where my focus is on that. The whole idea of planning for the pollinators is kind of weak, in my opinion. What we think of pollinators as a general public is not really what a pollinator is. A lot of pollinators you can't even see. So there is that. And I also grow bonsai because I've been growing it for 30 years. I'm not that old. Trust me. The gray makes me look worse, but I've been growing it my whole life. And so that's my fine art that I'm into. So I do that. Okay. Propagation it is, and we'll do propagation. Yeah, I've just never really been into houseplants. I've got a couple, but yeah, bees are not your only pollinator. Do not think that bees are your only pollinator. Um, and not everything yellow is a bee. So the biggest pollinator is wasps, and not the stinging kind. Go figure. Yeah, so I propagate a lot actually. I have a big jade tree. I posted it on my Instagram, I think not too long ago. I've been growing it for 15 years. It's been in my possession. And so I've made multiple trees off of this jade. I propagate hydrangeas, a lot of flowers and stuff like that, tomatoes. I do that. I haven't done peppers or anything like that, but we'll save that for next week. All right. So we'll do propagation on Wednesday, everybody. Wednesday, I should be good. If not, then I'll schedule it later, but we should be good for Wednesday. We'll talk about that. And before we go, any last questions or anything anybody wants to say? Danlo, don't propagate now. Just just wait. A turkey or a ham, fam? I like turkey when I shoot it. Otherwise, I eat ham. And I'm going hunting Monday, so hopefully we'll have a deer. Well, I'm glad you learned a lot, Coco. Coco cookies. All right, everybody. So propagation next week. Super excited about that one. And y'all have a fantastic week. I have to use my mouse pad, so I'm really slow moving. It's kind of pitiful. Okay, bye.